At the Soybean Board, we've been working on Biobased for quite some time. As you've heard, the farmers have invested in it. And on the demand side, I think we know a theory of change. And that theory of change to drive demand always includes identifying early adopters. And number two, it includes working up and down the supply chain. And so today's presentation really highlights how those two pieces are key, in my opinion, for success moving forward on a bio-based installation. And we thank our three folks with us today. Starting from the far side, we have George Nagel, Vice President of Synlawn. George, if you haven't noticed, be sure to check out George's shoes. He walks the talk, literally, of bio-based. George, not only has he worked at the top level of his company, you're going to hear a story today about the people on the ground. The distributor right there in Florida played a key point in working with our next two folks. So in the center, we're thankful to have Gina Parrish with Delaware North. Gina's going to tell us a little bit more. Delaware North has 50,000 employees, is it, across the world? Worldwide. So this is a company that you want to learn more about and their leadership, not only at NASA Kennedy Space Center, but at facilities like Yellowstone National Park and in Europe too. Yep, Wembley Stadium. So listen for how they're driving demand for bio-based, not only in one facility, but sharing that. And then importantly, we're very thankful to have Shanna Trout from NASA Kennedy Space Center with us, because Shanna has played an instrumental role, and I will just say, having worked with government agencies, NASA has been right there at the top as far as saying, we will do biopreferred. I mean, I remember hearing you say, Shanna, if it's not biopreferred, I'm not interested. And you don't hear that very often. And that's part of why we're having this dialogue. How do we get more Shannas in the world? So with that, we've asked each of them to kind of start the conversation with, this has been a big commitment for their agencies and their organizations to participate today. So we've asked you to kind of tell us a little bit about why are you here and what you hope to get from today's program.
I'm very pleased to be here. I feel very honored to be representing NASA. That is, of course, I am a contractor of NASA, and the majority of the work that's done within NASA is done by the contractors, as with other federal agencies. So what I'm here to do is first I thought I would mention the vision of NASA, because I think it parallels so well with what we're all here and what we're all here to learn from each other and how we're here to grow. And that NASA's vision is to reach for new heights, reveal the unknown for the benefit of humankind. And I feel like all the messages I've heard today is to reveal the unknown and to benefit humankind. So I wanted to start out with that, to just hopefully bring inspiration, because NASA brings inspiration to so many people, young people and old. Over the last 50 years, as you know, NASA's been celebrating the Apollo program, and this most recently landing on the moon. And so that has been, we reflect on the past to learn for what is to come in the future. And so we have the new Artemis program, and NASA plans to go by 2024 back to the moon and to bring a female astronaut as well as a gentleman and put the boots on the moon, and then in hopes to continue on to Mars. And so I couldn't help but think about that, and this morning think about how soybeans might be involved, how other crops might be involved in that, because I like to look at the big picture. And those crops that we're growing here on Earth, we have also been trying to demonstrate in the space station and other places, soybeans, corn, many other crops that could be used to harvest and to make advancements, because there is no petroleum that I'm aware of on the moon or Mars. And so I just wanted to kick it off, hopefully a little inspirational, and then listen to our panels, because these are actually the experts on the subject.
Yeah, I'm with Delaware North Parks and Resorts Division. Like she said, we're kind of everywhere, but you never know we're there. We're a private company that we have parks and resorts, we have hotels, we're in all aspects of hospitality, we have restaurants, casinos, and we're worldwide. So in that Parks and Resorts Division, we manage and run the concessionaire contract for the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. We are a government contract, but we're non-appropriated funding. So all of the funding that runs our contract is through concessions at the park. We had over 1.7 million visitors come to the park last year. We have, and it's really neat that there's such I guess a rejuvenated interest in space again. And then we had the Apollo 50th anniversary this year, and we've seen record numbers turnout. And then we have, of course, NASA's mission to the moon, SpaceX, Blue Origin's jumping on board, Boeing, and so we have a lot of new interest and a lot of people coming out. And our goal is to tell the NASA story. And it's really neat. My COO, his thing is, we want to tell that story. The cutting edge technology, the sustainability, all plays a part in that. And I think that's where we can help tell this story with bio-based products, because that is sustainable. If we want to go back to the moon and to Mars, we have to be sustainable. And that's where NASA's trying to help with those missions and what can we do. And so we're there to tell that story.
Hi, I'm George Nagel. Thanks for having me here. We're honored to be here. We have a unique offering that is maybe not as widely used as many of you know. At Synlawn, we're part of the Sport Group, which is a group of companies that comprise of the largest sports surfacing company in the world. We make high-performance polyurethanes and acrylics for court applications. You'd be surprised at how many court sports are out there. We actually use some bio-based products in those, bio-based polyols in those offerings. We also make EPDM rubber, which is a synthetic natural rubber, and it's binded with a binder that is bio-based as well. Those are used in track surfaces and pour in place. Pour in place is a playground surfacing. But our biggest offering is artificial turf. We are the third largest producer of artificial turf, the largest producer in North America. We have a facility right up the street in Dalton, Georgia. And also, I mentioned when I spoke about the binders, we do those binders in our chemical plant in Pennsylvania. So as far as the artificial turf goes, many of you are aware that it's widely used on sport applications. Our sister company is AstroTurf, and they've been around since the inception of it, and they have a very advanced offering for sports fields. We at Synlawn, we focus on landscape applications. Landscape applications is a pretty broad range of applications, and we focus on pet areas, pet facilities. We focus on playground applications, playground surfacing. We can create fall attenuation and head injury criteria for up to 12 feet for playground under playground equipment. Roof decks, patios, courtyards, any hard surface applications. And then we do a lot of golf greens as well. Golf greens, putting surfaces, hitting surfaces, and receiving surfaces. So many of you and many people are aware that our products lend to sustainability in its application. We lower emissions from small engines. We reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides. And the most quantifiable and the biggest impact that we have is that we save water. Excuse me. The So in its application, people are aware of that, but many are not aware that we are sustainable in our manufacturing. We've been using soy polyols in our backing since 2007. We have installed from there probably about 70 million, almost 70 million square feet of turf, and for various applications. Right now, we are working on, and we have produced a yarn. So when I say the secondary backing, that is the component that locks in the fiber. So there's really three components to our products. You have the yarn, you have the primary backing, which you stitch it into, and then you have the secondary coating. We have the soy polyol in the secondary coating, but also in the yarn, we're making yarn now out of sugarcane, and that is a USDA listed product for us. Also, it's going to be featured in the Olympics. We've done the last 4 Olympics with various track surfaces and turf surfaces, but there is the product with 60% sugarcane, the polyethylene, is going to be featured in the Tokyo Olympics next summer.
Cool. And nice transition to the photo on the screen. And the story of this and perseverance, I think, is part of the Biobased program. So in about 2014, some of you may know Jim Evanoff. We have to give a shout out to Jim Evanoff, who worked through his career at the National Park Service. And Jim was a pioneer in the use of biodiesel at Yellowstone National Park and many other parks. And Jim, because of his engagement with the park system and his connecting the dots between, there are all these other products too that are good, he approached us about coming to NASA Kennedy Space Center in some of your Earth Days in around 2014. And George flew all the way across the country from that Earth Day. And, we're standing out there in the hot sun and we're like, is this ever going to go anywhere? So what we'd like to have you focus on is this is where it went. So George, do you want to, or Gina, who wants to tell us what we're looking at here? Gina?
Okay, and to give a little background on that, George had given me, he and Laura come in and they gave me some samples of their products, and they've been sitting in my office, and every once in a while I would mention something, and then there became a need. I was in a project meeting. We had a smaller tent area that we were going to install this tent. They were looking at concrete pad for it, and it was really expensive. So I bring out his samples and I say, why don't we try this? Let's give them a call. And that's where it led. We had the little pavilion, and we liked the product so much that it led to these. The first one here is the North Lawn. We had a big grassy area. We wanted to expand our viewing for launches, but we had to be ADA compliant. And we had to meet some requirements for fire and some other NASA requirements. This met everything. So we saw how the turf was, how we liked it under the tent. So we went and expanded to that. This past year, the one on the right, that is our moon tree garden that we just, the trees that are planted around there are second generation from seeds that went up on Apollo 14. Oh, cool. We just did huge renovation over at the Saturn V Center for the 50th anniversary, and we installed this moon tree garden. So the first thing that came to our minds was, well, we want to put the Synlawn in there. So that was installed in there, and it's just beautiful right now. And so we have some other applications that we're looking forward to installing this, and like he said, no pesticides. It's a great walking surface. We're not having to water it, and it gives our landscapers some time to focus in on other areas instead of having to manage this grass.
So we want to also mention, George, it wouldn't have just happened if it hadn't been for George supporting this over the long haul at the national level, but also Raul at the local level. And somewhere in the room, we have one of the best champions of America's soybean farmers in the nation. She's in New York City, Anastasia Phillips. So stand up, Anastasia, because when it comes to driving demand, this woman knows how to do it. a school teacher who moves to New York City and rocks the house on bio-based products. She has trucks delivering product with soybeans on the side. She's never one to shy away about telling the energy security and the America Farmer Connection story. So I just have to hold out that, we've got too many miles behind us to not recognize that getting this information and this story into the hands of the Anastasia Phillips and the Raouls is incredibly important. So as you talk further about how we overcome obstacles, we want to talk about the opportunities and the obstacles. Shanna, do you want to take it from there?
Thank you. Yes. So not unlike DOD and other federal agencies, we have an annual sustainability report, and that's really our driver for sustainable acquisition and the procurement of biopreferred. And really, if you think of it, NASA, we are one of the major purchasers, and we don't have to go into a lot of numbers, but I did want to share that since 2016, when I last was able to speak about it during the stakeholders dialogue, NASA has increased their procurement of biopreferred purchasing from less than $1 million to at least $1.3 million worth of annual procurements. So I think it's a substantial amount that is making an impact. And the reason that it does make an impact is because it spurs the market. As you all know, the more you can get the product out, the more you can sell, the more we're going to go to stores like Target or Home Depot and see those items on the shelf now with these new USDA labels on them, and we can recognize them as consumers. So what I wanted to explain is that this amazing project that has happened, this relationship that was created, is also shared within the NASA community. So we highlight these kind of success stories within our agency. We give awards based on these type things. We try to incentivize this kind of relationship building and sharing of not only successes, but also could be failures or lessons learned that have gone along the process, along the way. Really, because that's where you make your biggest strides, is when you stick yourself out there, you make an attempt to go big, and sometimes you don't always go big. So those highlights of successes and lessons learned are very high priorities within NASA.
So you guys have been measuring. Do you want to, I think that's yeah.
So the reason that NASA knows a little bit about how much we buy as far as bio-based products, unlike others, is in the late 1990s, when President Clinton put out executive orders that had to do with buying recycled products, NASA put together an infrastructure to keep track of data on this. So this was part of the RCRA 6002 reporting. So what we did was we kept that same structure, and when the Farm Bill came out in 2002, we just kept the same structure and added that onto the data call that we had already throughout the agency. And we continued to collect that data, and we collected in the format that was needed to provide it up the chain. And so we do have data back as far mid 2000s. We have pretty decent data on both bio-based procurements and very good data on recycled content purchases, which was $10 million last year also.
George, did you have something to chime in on that?
Well, I was just going to mention I mentioned that we're a vertically integrated company in our manufacturing. We're also forwardly integrated with our network of distributors and installers, and Anastasia is one of them. So they also carry out our core values, because we're trying to change the paradigm of us having a petroleum-based plastic grass. We have a plant-based plastic grass, but all the components that we use as well, we source out renewable and recycled content in our products. And there's not a greater example of having a success story than what we've done at NASA. We're delighted to be associated with a cutting-edge, innovative offering and company like NASA and Kennedy Space Center. So it was a great tie-in for us.
So, and if my recollection is correct, you said it's got to be the USDA biopreferred product going down. And And so as a result of your being with us, this networking that is so important on Biobased, do you want to share, George and DOD, David Osceola, joined us 2 years ago when we had this event on the patio of USDA. And that turned out to be a very important connection point for Department of Defense and NASA. So do you want to talk about how you guys are moving forward possibly on NASA and DOD?
Yes, of course. So DOD graciously, actually, we met Dave Alciello 3 years ago now, and just by exactly how he offered here today, it was nothing different than that. He said, "Hello, other federal agencies, would you like to participate?" And I said, me, yes. So that's really where the bond started. I mean, it's as simple as that. This isn't something that's very complicated. And it was through the relationships, United Soybean, inviting federal agencies to participate, exemplifying good work. At that time, NASA exemplified the work that we mentioned earlier with Cargill and the FR3, how we've implemented those bio-based lubricants.
And one of the nice things about working with you is you find a way to get the case study published. And a shout out to George and Dee for helping Biosynthetics Technology get those case studies published. We often get stuck with that. So that's an obstacle that we sometimes face. Do we have questions from the room on how this? Yeah, absolutely.
Can I add an obstacle that I've seen over the years? You've got the cost and the availability, and I think the perception that this stuff's not going to work as well. Well, we tried bio-based oil. We've heard this out at Space Center. We tried it in the equipment back, early 2000s, and it gunked up the motor, it gunked up the engine. This is going to void our warranty. We've heard all of these stories. With working, we took part in the grease demonstration and in the oil demonstration, and I've heard back from our employees. They're like, that stuff worked. It worked well. We were pleased with the results, and they're going to be purchasing the bio-based grease. We used it in our lawn equipment, and we used it in our light trucks. But going into the oil and talking with George and Shanna, we have a fleet of 45 buses, and the first thing everybody said is, "You're not touching the buses. We don't want, no. This is our bread and butter. We can't have them breaking down." And that was the initial perception. And then as we used it in the light trucks, well, they worked, and we're getting longer time span for oil changes, and they were very pleased with it. So I think it's just kind of breaking down that perception that the bio-based isn't as good as the petroleum product.
Okay, and George, opportunities, obstacles. You guys are not only selling coast to coast, you're selling in 19 countries around the world. So you've heard USDA present today opportunities and obstacles that we can address.
Well, one of the obstacles that we have to face is that when we're trying to drive preference to the product, it is the end user doesn't see the value in it to pay more for it. So we really have to think about controlling the cost, and also to mention what you just touched on, there's a perception and a misconception that bio-based products are not as good. Okay, soy-based products are not as good. So it was unacceptable for us to have any compromise in quality. In fact, it needed to be better than just as good. It needed to, and so we've been able to figure out how to increase the performance by increasing the tough bind, what locks in the fiber for us, and that's a very important to address that. We have to mention that our products are better with bio-based technology.
And USDA has opened the door for you folks have some of the most experience with USDA but preferred, and thank you all for asking the question of what recommendations do you have for USDA biopreferred moving forward? Well,
we've been doing this since 2007 without without some of the drivers. Now, the United Soybean Board has been a key driver for us, and the USDA, the Biopreferred program. I cannot emphasize enough, and we should not minimize at all the value of that label. That has allowed us to have a credible label from a credible agency to promote promote these products. And I love. I'm not sure who it was, but I heard earlier that that label being as powerful as the organic label. That's certainly something that we're trying to do with the label. Also. We gain a lot of preference through military and federal projects. Even homeowners we gain preference through, and we've gotten a lot of great marketing opportunities being part of this. But one of the things that we have a problem doing is leveraging our success with federal agencies because of security reasons. So that directory and the promotion of the directory of those who have bio-based products, I can't emphasize that enough. The promotion of that is really key.
I would say, too, we use a lot of bio-based products in our food and beverage portion at the visitor complex. And I've noticed an uptick over the last couple years since I've been at the visitor complex. We answer guest comments. And we've had, and it's more and more about the plastics, the single-use plastics, and the petroleum aspect, and so people, I think, are becoming more aware out there in the general public, and it kind of shined a light on what I needed to do as far as promoting that within the visitor complex. We're using bio-based utensils, and we actually use our bio-based straws we're using now. We went to paper, and we had too many guest complaints, so we found a bio-based straw, and you just have to ask for them. We took them behind the counter type thing. But I had to answer a couple complaints about, well, why are you using plastic utensils? And then I'm like, well, maybe we need to market this a little bit more within the park to our guests. And so we're working on that right now on our website. And I think that's probably something industry-wide, I think, that needs to be marketed to us about what those products are out there, what's available, and the cost factor. We're seeing the reason we've kind of did an uptick in food and beverages because more and more that's been, I think we use Cisco or somebody, more that's being provided to us or it's being offered. And we have a couple other distributors out there. And, for a while there, you couldn't find anything. So I just think it's maybe on the private industry side, it's the marketing of what's available for you to use and how it benefits, just getting that story out.
So also throughout NASA, we have multiple locations, multiple regions all over the country. And some of the things Gina's saying are echoed throughout the voices of those different organizations. Now, something to keep in mind that one of the struggles has been always for programs such as this is working within your organization. If you're a federal government, if you're a state government, working in your organization if you are environmental, if you're organized where your environmental organization and your procurement organization are separate, it's working together. That has been definitely NASA's number one issue. What's not an issue, but area of concern and emphasis is to continue working together all the way from NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. The Environmental Management Division works with NASA procurement. And then, so I didn't really explain that I am funded out of the Environmental Management Division, but work closely with the procurement organization to spread their message and to communicate in a way that both the people that are in charge of purchasing and in charge of the requirements can both understand. So that has really probably, at least on a federal level, one of the largest challenges. But then again, all these different locations, just like other federal agencies, we have to once we solve it at one location, continuing to share that information with everybody else so that they don't have to go through the same steps and reinvent the wheel every time. So I would say that to all the federal government, we all should share, and then also bring it down to a level where your working organizations can understand and see the benefits.